of how do you protect yourself and the information that you gather and your sources when you're arrayed against people who don't want you to report or want to find out what you're reporting or where you got that information from, and they have a number of high-tech capabilities that you need to defend yourself against. What we've increasingly seen is actually those strategies used by those individual hackers have been picked up by the sort of people that target journalists and used against them. And it's a pretty easy thing to do because increasingly the tools that you might turn against someone to find out who they're talking to, what they're talking about, what they're writing, are high-tech tools. Every person has a cell phone or a smartphone. Every journalist has a laptop, and both of those two things are peculiarly vulnerable to the kind of level of surveillance that people really don't expect. There are fairly good legal protections, particularly actually for journalists, about wiretapping. So if the US government wanted to find out what I was saying to someone who I was communicating with, they would have to get a warrant, right? They would have to target me in particular, at least to be legal. And that sort of precedent is set in most countries. One of the problems, though, is that everything else that this phone collects about me, including my location, is much more easily obtained by the government. One of the things we found is that, well, first of all, there are really three major groups that try and target journalists. One of which is repressive governments, another which is organized crime, drug cartels, that kind of group. And the final group is just simply the subject of the story you're writing about. This is a battle that's still in flux, right? This sort of attack on reporters is something that only began a few years ago and is increasing more and more. So it's important for journalists to make themselves anonymous. It's important for them to encourage the sources that they talk to protect themselves. And finally, it's important for both readers and journalists to learn ways of getting around censorship so that both reporters can make sure that their audience is really getting to hear what they're saying, and readers can be confident that they're reading this information without making themselves at risk.
When you get online, everything you do online can be tracked at a millisecond resolution. Everywhere you browse, everything you do across your internet connection can and will be recorded. So how does Tor fit in all this? So we're a nonprofit, we do research, that's our website. Most of what we do is produce research papers on how to be anonymous online. The goal is to give you control over your identity. So all this sort of surveillance and tracking that happens in the digital world, you control what you want to divulge to who. Tails is this one system we're working on with the Knight Foundation, mainly aimed at journalists right now, who only have internet cafes to use. So you go in with a USB stick or a CD-ROM or something, you take this thing, you plug it in the computer, you reboot it, or you just boot it up, and it will do everything anonymously and privately. Everything's stored securely on the USB key. So there are lots of cultures where the simple investigating and looking at information gets you in trouble. You're not trying to advocate, you're not trying to talk about it, you're not trying to spread it, you're simply trying to read. And the good news is that, this sounds like doom and gloom, but journalists have figured out how to stay alive in conflict zones. If you go into the inner city in the middle of gang wars, if you go into actual war zones, there are very good guides, some of them produced by CPJ actually, on how to stay alive. That sort of knowledge helps you make your own risk assessment.
Things like Tor are excellent for particular times when you want to go out on the internet and there will be risks there. But a lot of the best protections are non-technical, but not necessarily yet common sense. It's two things. If I can get everybody in this room to do two things, I've basically lifted you up into the closest you can get to crypto heaven in such a short amount of time. One of which is if you go on Facebook and you go on Twitter, go into the settings and turn on secure communications, HTTPS. That means your communications with that website is encrypted. So that means that nobody between you and the EFF can read or intercept or spy on that communication. not even governments. It's a fairly unbreakable code. The second one is choose a strong password. A great journalistic case of this was Matt Honan, who is a Wired reporter out of my hometown of San Francisco. And through some rather clever tricks, someone got hold of his Apple .me account and got his email there, and actually managed to delete simultaneously everything on his iPhone, everything on his iPad, and everything on his MacBook. That's one of the consequences of depending on this technology, right? Is that not only is it a place where people can get information, it's a place where somebody who just doesn't want you to report can sabotage that. So.
Why should you care? It's because it's there, you may not be aware of it, it's bigger than you can imagine, and it's growing. It's going to be with you as an issue during your entire career.
All right, I would like to thank Andy Alexander for working with the Institute for International Journalism to make this panel possible, and also Professor Stewart, the EW School of Journalism, for sponsoring this event.